Welcome back, everybody. This is another episode of the Exodus Project. I'm your host, Steve Eisenhower. I am joined with my good friend, Rabbi Stuart Federow.
Hi, Steve.
And today we're going to finish with part 3 of the Christian law problem. But first things first, everyone, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and give Rabbi and I a big thumbs up. All right, Rabbi, let's get right into it.
All right. We talked somewhat about this, but it's a much larger issue. And the idea is that, okay, we know in Christianity that they'll say things like, if you break one law, it's as if you broke all laws.
Right.
Okay, that the wages of sin are death. Therefore, even if you break even one law, eat pig or something, then you get the death penalty, or that you're worthy of the death penalty. And that has a tendency sometimes to lead people to think that all the laws are interrelated and that it's an all or nothing proposition, that you must do all the laws, you may as well do none of the laws.
Right.
Let me give you an example, okay? And I kind of hate to use this as an example, but I'm going to anyway. I would have a difference of opinion with my parents, with my mother specifically. My mom, in the middle of nowhere, okay, Jewishly nowhere, in Springfield, Missouri, where I was born and raised, there was really not a whole lot that was Jewish. About every 3 or 4 months we'd go to St. Louis to stock up on kosher meat. Our house was strictly kosher. We had one building that housed 2 congregations. My family was on the Orthodox side of the building, which is what they called it back then. We did our best to maintain a kosher Jewish home and an Orthodox lifestyle in the middle of Springfield, Missouri. However, I hate to say this, but when we would go out to eat, my parents, my mom, might order something that's not kosher.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say, Mom, why are you getting that? She'd say, well, it's not kosher anyway. I'd say, yes, but just because the meat isn't kosher, does that give you permission to order bacon?
Right.
Well, but the meat isn't kosher. I said, yes, but just because you are disobeying the commandment of not eating meat unless it's kosher meat does not give you permission to break all the laws. We kind of touched on this, last time, with the idea that, if you're going 20 miles an hour in a school zone and you see that you're going 23 miles, which is breaking the law, you may as well go 90, because to go 90 in a school zone is no different than going 23 in a 20-mile zone. But it's an attitude that not only do Christians have, but like my mom, may she rest in peace, Jews have that attitude too. And Judaism has never looked at Jewish law that way. Every Jewish law has its own effect on the person who's doing that law, its own reward, okay? It's not one or the other. Let me give you another example, okay? I gave this speech, I don't know if it even exists anymore, but it used to be called, now I forgot the name of it. It was for people who retired. They'd go to a camp for a week. They would have classes during the week, and they'd do, other fun activities as well. Mm-hmm. And can't think of the name of it now. But I did this class, as an introduction to Judaism, and the members of the Jewish community were there. There were Jews in the group. And I talked about this idea that it's not an all or nothing. This woman comes up to me after the lecture that night, and she says, so let me get something straight. I don't have a kosher home. When my parents died, my family stopped keeping kosher. I said, okay. And she said, so does that mean I can still light my Friday night Shabbat candles? It's not a kosher home.
Wow.
I said, wait a minute. I don't understand what one has to do with the other. The mitzvah, the commandment of God, is to light the lights of the Shabbat. That's what we've been saying in the blessing. Okay? What does that have to do with whether or not what you eat when you're in that home? And she started crying, and she said, literally, she said, you gave me back my Shabbat candles. And it's unfortunately what people do. We make relationships between things that are not related.
Right.
The rabbis never thought that it was an all or nothing. That if you go 20 and you go 23, you may as well go 90. Because every single commandment has its own effect on the person who does it and its own reward. Okay.
Right. How could one try to do their best if the entire stipulation is all or nothing anyhow?
Right, exactly. Why bother doing the law if it's undoable?
Right.
If you break one law, you break them all. This is the Christian approach. Okay.
Right.
Judaism says you're going to make mistakes. Stop doing the bad, start doing the good. Get back on the bandwagon, so to speak.
Yeah, it offers no self-growth. It offers
exactly
no. For example, you gave that example. What if? Now, I obviously never met your mother. May she rest in peace or anything. But what if one day the spark just ignited? Well, hey, we can drive to St. Louis and go out to eat there if that's what it takes. You know what I mean? It's just saying that what if, there's always room for self-growth. And if
no matter where you are, and this will become important in another few minutes, no matter where you are on the ladder that has 613 rungs, you can always strengthen the rung you are already standing on.
Right. Well said.
Or you can move upwards. Which brings me to a Hasidic story that was told to my family when we were at a retreat outside of St. Louis by the one back then who was the head of the Chabad of St. Louis. I'm almost 70. This has got to be 60 years ago, give or take. Okay. And he said the following story. He said the disciples of the rabbi, the Rebbe, were trying to play Stump the Rebbe. And so the boldest student came to the Rebbe and they said, Rebbe, we have a problem for you to solve. He said, okay, what's the problem? They said, there's a ladder. There are 613 rungs on the ladder. There's someone near the top and there is someone near the bottom. Who in the eyes of God is higher? You understand what that means? Somebody's obeying almost all the commandments and somebody is down below is obeying far, far fewer.
Yep.
So the rabbi knows that if he says the one at the bottom, that's ridiculous because it denies the heights achieved by the one at the top. But if he says the one at the top, does that mean that the one at the bottom is irrelevant to God? So he doesn't answer. And the students think, we got him. He can't answer. So the bold student says to the rabbi, Rabbi, what's your answer? And the rabbi says, you haven't told me the whole problem. And the student thinks to himself, he says out loud, well, yes, I did. There's a ladder. There's 613 rungs. Someone's near the top. Someone's near the bottom. Who in the eyes of God is higher? And the rabbi says, but you haven't told me which one is moving upwards.
Wow.
The implication is that to be stagnant, is maybe satisfactory, but the person who's always striving to do more, striving to make, working hard, I hate the word striving, working hard to make their position more solid, more secure, is in the eyes of God going to be higher. Okay, let's talk about that for a minute. Okay, there are cities in the United States and elsewhere that has their own board of kosher. Okay, they are the ones that certify restaurants that they are truly kosher. They are the ones that will certify a manufacturing company that manufactures foods as kosher. Okay? They are certifying a restaurant, let's say, to the standards of the community. But it is quite possible that one of the rabbis representing the Kashrut Association, the Kosher Association, will go to a restaurant, certify it as kosher, but he himself will not eat there. Why? Because his personal standards are at a higher level than the city's standards.
Wow.
You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Does it happen often? No. Can it happen? Absolutely. Okay. I know a rabbi in Houston, Texas, Houston Kashrut Association, on behalf of the city, will certify a place as kosher, but he himself will not eat there. Well, does that mean he's lying? It's not really kosher. No, it's kosher, but according to the city's standards. There are a wide variety of standards. A person can have high standards or low standards, but just because they have low standards doesn't mean they're not keeping kosher to some extent.
Right.
Okay. There are, the little bitty symbol that's placed on the packaging of the manufactured food that says, yes, this is a kosher food manufactured according to kosher standards is called the hechsher. You hear the word kosher and hechsher, kosher. Okay, you hear okay. It's called the hechsher. All right? There are some Jewish groups who will not see as kosher the hechsher of another organization because they have a different set of standards or a higher set of standards or whatever you want to call it. But does that mean that that is not really kosher? It means that according to one group, person, company, organization, whatever, their standards is not. But to others, their standard may be slightly different for whatever reason. Okay? It's not as monolithic as people want to think. So if we recognize that there are different standards, some are higher, some are lower, then when we say that something is not as high as someone else's really isn't kosher? Steve, I have members of the Jewish community who will tell me, oh, I don't keep kosher. Okay. Do you eat pig? No, I don't eat pig. Well, do you eat shrimp? No, I don't eat shrimp or any kind of shellfish. So how are you not kosher? He says, well, I'll eat meat out. I said, but the mere fact that you are denying yourself, okay, you're saying no to yourself, recognizes that you are in fact commanded by God to eat certain things and not eat certain things. Right, and so you're already placing yourself on a ladder, not very high. Okay.
Right. But you've at least recognized that there are things that God has commanded you can eat and that you cannot eat, right?
Exactly. Okay. And I don't agree with it, okay, but there are people who will say, well, I keep biblically kosher. I will keep the kosher rules of no pork or anything from pig, and I keep the biblical commandment of not eating shellfish. But I will, in fact, eat, McDonald's hamburger or something. Okay, it's still pure hamburger. It's coming from a cow, but it's not killed according to Jewish law. It's not kosher.
Right.
Okay,
right.
So they'll say that they are biblically kosher, or some will call it Levitically kosher. Okay. But the point is that they are at least acknowledging and recognizing that they are in fact commanded by God not to eat those things. They are just not taking it to a higher step on the ladder of saying it's not rabbinically kosher. Right. They're not eating meat that is rabbinically supervised of how it is slaughtered.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But even the fact that they have said no to pork or shellfish gives them merit for what they have done. Has an effect on their Jewishness, their identity. They are saying, I have a relationship with God who commands me not to eat this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That immediately gives them merit and an effect on their psyche, on their heart, on their soul. Okay? Judaism has never said it's an all or nothing thing. Oh, well, I'll eat let me get. Okay. Second story told to my family. I was probably about 8, 9 years old when and I still remember it as distinctly as sitting here talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
the Chabad rabbi speaking to the adults, and I'm a crazy kid, so I would go to these lectures. I remember the following. He said he told the following story. Okay, and look, I'm going to use a modern examples, even though back then McDonald's didn't even sell these foods yet. But the basic idea is the same.
Right, right.
Okay, what he said was the following. He says, you're going to eat at McDonald's. Okay, you've got multiple choices. Do you have to get the bacon cheeseburger? I understand, he said, that the meat is not kosher. But you're putting milk with it and you're putting pig with it. Isn't it better, if you're going to go to McDonald's, to get the cheeseburger and not get the bacon cheeseburger? Because at least you're acknowledging God's commandment not to eat pig.
Right.
But let's take that another step. You're going to go eat at McDonald's. Do you have to get the cheeseburger? Do you have to violate the law which separates milk and meat derived from the biblical injunctions of killing a baby goat by boiling it alive in its own mother's milk? Okay? Isn't it better to get the hamburger, even though the hamburger's not kosher? Isn't it better to get the hamburger that's not kosher than to have hamburger, which is meat, with cheese and make a cheeseburger?
Right, right.
Okay. And then he said, let's take it another step further. You're going to go eat at McDonald's. Do you have to eat the hamburger?
Right.
Why not get a fish sandwich? Okay. Isn't it better to eat the fish sandwich? Okay. I'm not sure what they did back then. I don't even think they had fish sandwiches back then. But you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I also have no idea what's in the oil used for the fish sandwich, or if the other things that they make with oil are also made when they in the same oil with the fish. But using his example, isn't it better to eat a fish sandwich than it is to eat the hamburger that's not kosher? You're eating fish, not kosher meat.
Right, right.
Okay? In the modern world, not back then, but he would have continued, I'm sure, and he'd have said the following. You're going to go into a McDonald's. Do you have to get the fish sandwich? Okay, why not get the salad?
Yeah, why not just get a salad? Yeah, right.
In other words, every single time you put something in your mouth, you got a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It is better to eat a salad than it is to eat a fish sandwich. It is better to eat a fish sandwich than it is to eat a hamburger. It's better to eat a hamburger than it is to eat a cheeseburger. It's better to eat a cheeseburger than it is to eat a bacon cheeseburger. Every single step along the way, you are acknowledging that there is a ladder, and you are putting yourself on that ladder by saying, I am commanded by God not to eat these things, and I am going to make a decision that connects me with my God. Okay? Is it horrible? Are you going to go to hell and be damned for eternity because you chose, pick one, a hamburger instead of a cheeseburger, a hamburger instead of a fish sandwich, a fish sandwich instead of a salad? No. But the benefits of keeping kosher will not be yours completely if you not completely keep kosher. Right. What are the benefits? Okay, we'll get to that in a few minutes. But Judaism never believed it's all or nothing. Every single commandment has its own merit, its own reward, and its own effect on the person who does them.
Right.
Okay.
On that same topic, I heard a really impactful story today. And it's along those same lines. It was about I'm not sure if it was a family or a community, and they were Jews living in Soviet Russia, and this was after the Soviet Union had been dispelled, so a very godless area, Stalin era communism was, very godless, anti-religion, so they weren't observant whatsoever in any regard, really. The story was, a very famous rabbi, I think it was like Rabbi Cook or someone along those lines.
Right.
He goes there and he brings himself some bread and some wine, and he's there and he's didn't even give like a Devar Torah to the people. He just sat there, sang songs with them, accepted them, just talked with them. a later rabbi comes to the community later, and he assumes like their kitchen isn't kosher, so he brings his own bread, and he's getting ready to leave. Same thing, just sat there, talked with them, sang with them, all this. As he's getting ready to leave, he's like, he says something along the lines of, next time I hope we could eat together or something like that. And they respond with, oh, well, our kitchen is actually kosher. And he said, really? And they said, yeah, when Rav Kook was here, he said the same thing you did. I wish next time we could eat together. And we said, you know what? We should make our kitchen kosher. And what really hit me was they weren't inspired by some lecture, and they weren't inspired by, a Devar Torah or anything like that. They were inspired by the fact that they were accepted as fellow Jews, despite the fact that they, didn't keep any mitzvot really, but the rabbi accepted them for who they are and the fact that they were Jews, and it motivated them. I want to keep kosher so I can eat with him, and that really touched me.
Steve, I'll tell you something again about my parents. Okay, my grandmother, my mother's mother, passed away when I was 6 years old. Every time I'd ask my mom and dad, why did you decide to keep kosher? They said, because we didn't want our parents to come and visit our home and not eat with us. We kept a kosher home. And at one point, I'm doing the math, I'm figuring things out, and I said, wait a minute. Your mom passed away when I was 6 months old, but you continued to keep kosher. So it couldn't have really had to do with them eating there. Once they weren't going to come, that was, my father's parents were alive for many years. Okay. But my mother's parents, okay, they had passed away, but they kept our house kosher. Mm-hmm. And my mom thought about it, a good couple of minutes of silence. She thought of me. She said, Stuart, let me tell you something. It's incredibly hard to be Jewish. Okay. Even if it's New York, it's hard to be Jewish. Okay. It's not always easy. And she wasn't even talking about anti-Semitism. She wasn't talking about getting beaten up on the way home from school. Okay. She didn't grow up in New York. She lived in New York for a little while, but she born and raised in St. Louis. Both of my parents were. Okay. She said, people need something tangible, something they can hold on to, something that they can grasp.
Right.
And this to them becomes their way of life. It becomes a part of them that they don't even realize that this is part of who they are and what they do. Mm-hmm. And in order for, and she said, my children, meaning me and my two brothers, in order for my children to have something that tangible, that expressive, that much part of their being, your dad, my father and we decided that we would continue keeping kosher because we knew you needed something to hold on to be part of who you were, and just take it for granted. It goes back to what I said. Every Jewish law has its own merit, its own reward, and its own effect on the person who does them. Look, Steve, I'm not stupid. Okay, going back to the McDonald's, is it better for a person not to eat at McDonald's if they want to keep kosher? Yes. Okay, but if you're going to acknowledge that you are a Jew, that you are in a direct relationship with God, and through that direct relationship has commanded you not to eat certain things.
Right.
And then whatever level of you, whatever your own personal standard will be, okay, be.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Another important thing, God is not stupid. Okay?
Right.
There's a reason why. Steve, if you and I, this is going to really irritate people. If you and I go into a contract together, why am I going into a contract with you? Why are you going into a contract with me? Because you get something out of it and I get something out of it.
Right.
It's an agreement that whatever the agreement's about, it'll give me a benefit, it'll give you a benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So if God enters into a covenant with the Jewish people, we know what the benefit is to the Jewish people. And we're going to get into that very explicitly in a couple seconds. What's in it for God? Why does God want to enter into this covenant with anybody, much less the Jews? You know, Amos? Yeah, my memory. You know, I didn't make a covenant with you because you're the most numerous, but rather because you were the smallest.
Right.
Okay? Steve, you do beautiful woodworking. Are you going to want an advertising agency for your woodworking corporation that only has you as a client, or one that has 500 clients?
Just me.
Right, because then they can concentrate all your efforts. God doesn't want the most. God wants the least populated, because we can be because our whole raison d'etre is this covenant with God.
Mm-hmm.
And what does God get out of the covenant? We Jews, when we keep our commandments, or even a part of them, even with low standards, become an inherent reminder to the rest of the world that there is a God who in fact demands morality and ethics from all of God's creatures. We become an inherent advertising agency for God and God's morality and ethics. But God is not stupid. God is not going to give us these laws and hope we do them. God's going to give us these laws that are going to have a very direct effect on the people who do them. As I've said repeatedly, its own merit, chalk went up for Steve, okay, its own reward, okay, which is tied in with the effect it has on you. What are those effects? If you grab a hold of 100 Jews and you say to each one of them, tell me something you do that is exclusively Jewish, distinctively Jewish, and then tell me why you do it. Somebody might say, well, I stand in line in a soup kitchen and hand out soup to poor people. Yeah, well, good, but you could be doing that right next to the Buddhist.
Right.
Okay, or a Hindu, or a Jain, or a Christian, or a Muslim, or whatever. They do it too. Okay, that's not exactly exclusively Jewish. So tell me something you do that is exclusively, distinctively a Jewish thing to be doing, and why do you do it? Their answers will almost invariably fall under one or more of four categories of the motivation for doing Jewish law. Okay, go read the book, The 9 Questions People Ask About Judaism by Dennis Prager and Joseph Telushkin. He talks about this in there. Okay, so this is where this is where I plagiarize, this is where I am repeating, okay? The 9 Questions People Ask About Judaism, The Intelligent Skeptic's Guide. Okay, four categories of Jewish law. Clearly, if the raison d'etre of having the Jewish people, do these things is to tell the rest of the world that there's a God, then the first answer should be holiness.
Right.
I am bringing God into my life. I am making a connection between myself and my Creator, who commands me to do or not do whatever it is. Okay? We already talked about this woman who I gave her back her candles on Friday night. If you ask somebody, why do you light candles on Shabbat? Hopefully they will say one of 4 things. Hopefully one of them will be because I feel compelled by God, commanded by God to light the candles on Shabbat. Okay? They'll say, well, I light the candles and it gives an aura of Shabbat to my home. I light candles because it sets apart that night from all the other nights. I'm not talking Passover. Just kidding. Okay. What does holy mean? Holy means set apart, different, and distinct.
Right.
Okay. I have a book, which is in the other room. Okay. I have a book. It's a book, and there's a whole bunch of books out there, billions of books out there. This book I hold sacred, special, set apart, holy, because it's the Holy Scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
It's still paper and ink and binding and whatever else goes into it. Okay? But I hold it sacred because it's the Bible.
Right.
Okay? Holy means separate, set apart, different, distinct. Okay? The holiness in your life sets apart one day different from the other 6. Okay? So a person's first answer on why they do something so distinctly be Jewish as lighting candles for the 7th day of the week is that it's holiness. Okay? Okay, remember I said that the motivations for doing Judaism will fall under one or more of 4 categories. Okay? And some may argue 5 or 6, whatever. But for me, it's 4 because they'll say something to me. It sounds like one, not the other. Okay. But let's take something that will really fall under all 4 categories. Keeping kosher. Okay? Why do you keep kosher? God commands me. It connects me with God. That's the holiness. Another person may say, oh, I don't care about God. I just think it's a more ethical way to take the life of an animal. If I have to be sustained, then I think the animal's life should be taken as quickly and as painlessly as possible. That's the Jewish way. It's keeping kosher. Mm-hmm. Okay? You want to argue if it's really that? I don't care. The point is that it's a concern of Judaism that the animal should be killed as painlessly and as quickly as possible. So a person may say, oh, I don't care about God. I don't feel God commanded me. But of all the ways I've studied, in how to take the life of an animal, that I should have sustenance, at least it's concerned, and that's why I do it. Another person, and that's the ethical. The whole point, raison d'etre, of God choosing the Jews is to tell the rest of the world that God exists, that's the holiness, and that God demands morality and ethics from all of God's creation, that's the ethical. But why else? Well, I remember that my parents kept kosher, and every time I put something in my mouth, God, I don't feel commanded. Okay? Ethical? Well, I could eat, if I really wanted to, but I just don't want to. But when I eat something I know is kosher, it connects me to my parents. That is the national. I call it, Prager call it, and Toulouse call it the national. It doesn't mean with the nation of the people of Israel. It means it's connecting you to other people.
Right.
Okay? My ancestors, my people. It connects me to my nation. It connects me to the entirety of the Jewish world. Okay? So holiness, ethical, national, and the 4th one is reflexive. This is a little bit harder to explain, but even it should be the most obvious. If a person has self-control in one thing, they will have self-control in many things. Mm-hmm. Okay? If you have a discipline in one thing, you will succeed at many things.
Right.
If you don't have a discipline in anything, you'll succeed at nothing. Okay? So if I keep kosher, I am disciplining myself on what goes into my mouth. Mm-hmm. Nothing connects us closer to God faster than eating. Try not eating for a few months. You'll figure out what I'm talking about. Okay? Mm-hmm. So the reflexive means that if you do it, you get benefit out of having done it. If you don't do it, you don't get the benefit.
Right.
So if I keep kosher, I get the benefit of self-control. I get the benefit of discipline. If I don't keep kosher, I don't get the benefit. Now, one of these 4 things, holy, ethical, national, or reflexive, makes me a horrible person if I don't get that motivation. I don't succeed. Okay? But on the other hand, if I don't do it, I don't get it. That alone becomes its own lack of reward. Mm-hmm. Okay? If I don't do it, I don't get connected to God. If I don't do it, I don't learn the ethical. If I don't do it, I don't feel connected to other people or my people or the nation or whatever. And if I don't do it, I don't get the inherent benefit out of having done it.
Right.
Okay? Mezuzah on the doorpost. Why do you put a mezuzah on the doorpost? Oh, it reminds me of God and keeps the holiness. Okay, that's the holy. Why do you put a mezuzah on the doorpost? Okay? it reminds me that why is the angle of the mezuzah, at an angle? Okay. First of all, it teaches us, because the rabbis argued, should it be like, flat like this or teaches us to compromise. That in the home there should be compromise.
Yeah, right.
Okay. It angles in. The top part is closest to the more important room. Okay. Well, if you come into a house, obviously it's not the outside that's the most important. It reminds you that's what's inside the house, family, that's more important.
Mm-hmm.
Put up the mezuzah, you get the reminders. Don't put up the mezuzah, you don't get the reminders. Doesn't mean you're horrible, evil, going to die and go to hell and be punished by God for eternity. It means you don't get the benefit.
Right.
So every single Jewish law will fall under one or more of the four categories. The more categories doing some Jewish does for you, the greater a Jewish identity it will give you.
Yeah. Right.
Makes sense? And it will have these effects on the person who does it. God is not stupid. God knows that if we are more likely to do these things, then we will become a greater reminder to the rest of the world that God exists and God demands morality and ethics from God's creation. And so we are more likely to do it because it gives us the benefit of the holiness, ethical, national, and reflexive.
Mm-hmm.
And so God makes benefit from having done these rules, these laws.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay? But the idea that it's all or nothing has never been a Jewish concept. Because every little thing we do brings us that much closer to the God who commands us to do it.
Right. Let's take one that's more mundane. Washing your hands before you eat.
Okay. First of all, a person, and look, what's going to motivate me to do a Jewish law may not be what motivates you to do a Jewish law. Do a Jewish law. What motivates you and me to do a Jewish law may not motivate someone else to do it. But by and large, these are the four categories that all of our motivations will fall under. So if we believe that God commands us to wash our hands before we eat, that connects us to God. That's the holiness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Steve, we just went through the COVID virus.
Right.
There are still 2,500 people a day who die from it. People forget that. Go look it up. Don't believe a word I've said. Okay? People still die from it is my point.
Mm-hmm.
So ethical, how do I treat others? I wash my hands. I don't shake their hands if I got a cold, which I do. Okay? The national. Well, there are not that many people out there who believe their God commanded them to wash their hands before they eat.
That's true.
Okay?
That's true.
So I am being a part of a group larger than myself by joining them in obeying God by washing my hands before I eat.
Mm-hmm.
And the reflexive is rather obvious. Okay? If I wash my hands before I eat, I'm going to be cleaner.
Right.
I'm not going to be eating with dirty little hands.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I'm not going to get the oil from the wood I've been working with in the food that whatever.
Right.
Okay. So, all right. By the way, and this is also going to make this a little bit more controversial. Okay. Do you want to have divine in your life? Do you want to bring the holy into your life? Consider conversion to Judaism. If you want to understand and be part of a system that is supposed to teach its adherents the ethical, how to treat everything else in the creation of God, the things, the animals, the people in God's creation, consider converting to Judaism. Okay? If you want to connect yourself to a group and a people that has been around for, 4,000 years, give or take,
Mm-hmm.
you want to connect to them, consider conversion to Judaism. If you want to have the immediate benefit from doing Jewish law, consider converting to the religion that's commanded to do them, through which we're commanded to do them. Yeah, that's called missionizing. Oh my God! So now they'll condemn you for allowing me to say that.
It's all right.
Okay. All right. The next thing, okay, and this is our last, but put up the quotation from Matthew chapter 5, verse 17 to 18. This is the last thing we're going to cover, I think.
Okay. Coming through all right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Christians will say, because they don't understand law, that Jesus in Matthew chapter 5, 17 to 18 said, "Think not that I have come to destroy the law or the prophets. I have come not to destroy, but to fulfill them. For verily I say to you, till heaven and earth pass, not one jot or one tittle shall pass from the law until everything is being fulfilled." Christians will think from that means Jesus came, he fulfilled the law, so nobody else on planet Earth ever has to do the laws of the Bible again. First of all, no Jew would ever say that. So this is Christians putting this concept into Jesus's mouth to justify Christians for not doing Jewish law. But, Christians aren't Jews. Okay. What's the first line of the Ten Commandments? I am the eternal your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Okay. You shall. Were the Christians brought out of the land of bondage? The commandments in the Bible weren't meant for non-Jewish nations. They weren't meant for the Gentiles.
Right.
They weren't commanded to do them. Okay? When it says, "You shall not steal," you shall not. Who's the you? Who's God speaking to on Mount Sinai? The Gentile nations of the earth? No, he's speaking to the Jews. The Jews are the ones who are commanded to do them. So that's probably why Christianity never really felt compelled to keep the laws of the Bible. And then in addition, you add all of that, the Pauline, what's the fancy term is antinomianism, meaning being against the law.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and gave it a lot of pushback when Jewish Christians tried to convert Gentile Christians to Judaism.
That's why the original
pushback.
People they'll say, "Oh, but the original Christians were Jews." Yeah, they called themselves the
Ebionites.
Ebionites. Okay. And in my opinion, there should be a controversy about the origin of that term. People will say Evion.
It means like the poor ones, right? Something like that.
Well, that's the problem. They'll say it's Evion, Ebionite. They'll say it's Evion, which means poor. I'm not quite sure that's where it comes from. Okay. How do you say, what does Peter mean in Greek?
Rock.
Exactly. How do you say rock in Hebrew? Evan.
Oh,
to
wow.
me, and who in the Christian's New Testament is trying to get the followers of their Jesus to keep Jewish law? Peter and James.
Right.
So I think it's a possibility, can't prove it, don't go by me, that the original Christians were Jews and they were the Ebionites, probably followers of James' view, Peter's view, that you got to keep the law. Okay, as the earliest church became more and more non-Jewish because they had a greater appeal to the pagan mentality, because Christianity didn't come from Judaism, it came from the idolatry of the pagan Greco-Roman world. Okay, I mean, come on, his mother was human, his father was God is a perfect description of Hercules, not just Jesus. Right. Okay, but as the Christian church became more and more non-Jewish at its base, the idea of keeping Jewish law, the Gentiles weren't commanded to begin with, and they put words in Jesus' mouth to rationalize them not keeping Jewish law.
Right.
But the idea that Jesus fulfilled the law and therefore that's the reason why nobody else has to keep the law, is ludicrous.
Mm-hmm.
So you're driving along, Steve, and there's a car in front of you, and you come up to a stoplight, and the car in front of you perfectly obeys the laws of stopping at a stoplight. The light turns green. Only then does he look both ways. He perfectly obeys the laws of stopping at a stoplight. Does that mean because he obeyed the law perfectly, you never have to stop at a stoplight again? I mean, come on, that's what they're saying.
It's silly, yeah.
That's not how law works. The point of law, what's the purpose and function of law? It's to make a better society for people to live in.
Right.
Okay, it's
and
not
in any society, it's a perpetual and evolving entity. Yeah, I mean,
exactly. So the idea that Jesus would even have thought that if he fulfills the law, nobody else has to keep it, ludicrous on every single level.
Right. You'll listen to that. You'll like this. So on one of my recent videos, someone commented, "Nothing's new under the sun." They were using that quote as a proof for Jesus.
Misquote.
Yeah, and a Jewish fellow responded back and said, "Oh yeah, just like in Solomon's temple when Solomon was talking, that the temple must have had electricity from the two power lines that were out front."
Yeah.
Right. And it's just that silly, that things can't, with the advent of new technologies or the advent of different ways of doing things, that the Jewish law doesn't have to account for that as well. That's just a crazy thought. I mean,
right.
like
Absolutely.
we said before about the cell phones in ancient Israel, there were no landlines, so there had to be cell phones. It's it's a totally
ludicrous
statement. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Steve, the thing about this whole thing about the law, okay, it's just so ridiculous. Okay, they don't understand law. They don't understand Jewish law. They don't understand God or God's law.
Right.
Okay, because that's not how laws work. The whole point of law is to make our lives better off. It's not a burden. It's not a condemnation. The purpose of the function of the Jewish law, God's law, because there was no other law. There was no New Testament. When they're talking about the law, it's talking about Torah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
It's not the purpose of the law is not to teach us we cannot keep the law, and therefore we need God to forgive us without. The purpose of the law and keeping the law isn't to give us. We don't keep the law to take away our sin. We only sin if we don't keep the law.
Yeah.
Okay, and the law itself tells us how to get back on the right side of God. Just like the law tells you if you get a ticket, how you get the ticket off your record. Take the class, pay the fine, whatever the word is.
Right.
Okay, drive better.
Right. I think in most cases a good way to describe it would be that the law is a boundary, and you haven't done anything wrong until you step outside that boundary.
Exactly right. And most laws don't apply to any one person at any one time.
Right.
The laws of being a farmer don't apply to me. And we've talked about this in previous weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So, lots of stuff that Christianity gets wrong about Jewish law. Lots of stuff that Christianity gets wrong about God's Torah law. Okay. Right. And hopefully our conversations the last few tonight and the last couple, have set that straight.
Yeah. I think one final thought, and I talked about this with a friend of mine recently, is I think for most people, at least in modern day, Christians look at the Torah as strictly simply just a religious document. And with like our American mindset, religion and society needs to be severed and so on and so forth. And they look at it that way, that the Torah is simply just a religious document and society was something else, rather than, the Torah order of things is that this is what you build your society upon. This is the ethics and morals by which your society is founded. This is the Jewish Constitution. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So, and our values are embedded in the individual laws of the Constitution in our Bible, no differently than American law is also. American values are embedded in the various laws. I'll give you a perfect example. Okay. If I harm a human being, there is a punishment.
Mm-hmm.
But if the person I harm happens to be an officer of the law, my punishment is increased.
Mm-hmm.
Why? It's because we place a higher value on keeping the police safe
Right.
than just the random average person. It's an expression of our value
Mm-hmm.
that the police are important to us.
Right.
And more important to keep them safe because they're the ones throwing themselves into danger. They run to the problem, not away from it.
Right. Right.
Okay? And so it's an expression of our values.
Mm-hmm.
Jewish law is no different.
Right.
The Torah is no different. And the Torah laws that we have been given by God are the same kind of laws that every other society, nation, community, neighborhood, whatever, that they would create too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, sure.
building laws, build a fence around your roof. Okay, laws of tort.
Mm-hmm.
I'm walking my dog on your lawn and he falls into a hole in your lawn. You're responsible for my dog.
Yeah.
It's your
Right.
lawn.
Yep.
Okay. That's verbatim right out of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a hole and one of your cows falls on your neighbor's hole, then your neighbor's responsible.
Yeah.
That's a
Guy with the
biblical
hole's
law.
responsible.
That's laws
Yep.
of tort.
Yep.
So they did misunderstand so much, and as usual, they get it wrong.
Right.
Yep.
And, as we had mentioned last time, stealing, for example, livestock, it comes with a heavier price on the return. You have to pay double or triple, whatever it is.
Five additional 20%.
Right. But what are we seeing by that? It's giving you weighted recompense, and what's that doing? It's the entire motive is that you will do better next time. Well, I don't want to have to pay 20% because I stole something, so I'm just gonna not steal, right? So
Isn't that the point of all punishment?
It's just so simple.
Isn't that the point of all punishment? That if you do
Right.
it, you get punished. You're less likely to do it again.
Exactly.
You learn your lesson and you move on.
Yep.
It goes back to what we were sort of saying with keeping kosher, for example. Okay? By accident or by intent, you eat something that's not kosher. So do you turn your back on Judaism and say, I made a mistake, I'm now a sinner, I'm a horrible human being, I won't be Jewish again? We don't walk away from it. What happens is you made a mistake by accident or by intent, but now you get back on the wagon and you start acting right.
Mm-hmm.
You don't condemn yourself. You don't say, ooh, I'm an evil person, I should get hell and whatever. You just kind of, do better.
Yeah. The righteous fall 7 times. You get up and you do better.
Right. Exactly right.
But all right, everybody. Rabbi Stuart Federow, author of Judaism and Christianity: A Contrast.
Thank you.
Also translated in Spanish. Both of those are linked in the description of this video.
Buy it.
And speaking of said book, when we hit 1,000 subscribers, going to be doing a giveaway. So hit that subscribe button. And also have a free.
How close are you?
About 240 away. 230 away.
That's not bad.
Yeah. And also, I have an ebook coming out called the Christian Coloring Book. Little counter-missions pamphlet you can keep right in your pocket. Good for any of the main topics.
Is it also going to be on Kindle or whatever?
I could put it on Kindle. Yeah, for
need
sure.
To. Absolutely need to. I used to have I used to have an app that was basically the full text of my website, whatjewsbelieve.org.
Mm-hmm.
And it was immediate. They could refer to it immediately on their phone as soon as they had it.
Right.
Yep. But the Apple and Android platforms kept wanting an update. And it's a text. It doesn't change.
Right.
It's not a game. It's not something that needs to be improved.
Exactly.
Okay. And
but regardless, all that same info is on the website, whatjewsbelieve.org.
Absolutely. But the person who did the app for me got tired of keep going back to create an update out of nothingness.
Right.
So basically, we decided to pull it off. I'd love to get it back on, but at any rate.
But all right, everybody. Until next time, this was the Exodus Project, Rabbi Stuart Federow, and we'll see you on the other side, guys.